Friends, welcome to the Get Ready webinar for my new Lent series called Busy. And I am so excited about introducing you to this series because I know the experience that I have been having as I've been preparing it. And it has been pretty significant for me. And it has changed my own spiritual path and my life and my thinking in a way that other series have not. Even just beginning to create the series and think about my own schedule in creating the series, I had to deal in a real way with the way that I keep myself so busy that I can distract myself from the spiritual journey. And I think that's something that you, as those who will prepare it and your congregations who will experience it, could actually have a profound experience during Lent of really taking stock of our lives. And that's what we want to do in Lent, right? So it's a different way of taking stock of our lives. Busy reconnecting with an unhurried God really invites us to do some fasting for Lent, but not fasting in the way that we usually think about fasting during Lent. So instead of giving up chocolate or something like that, which, oftentimes the popular notion of fasting is punishment, right? Something to deprive ourselves of something so that we can somehow get in touch with God. Well, I'm not sure that God is that interested in us just, suffering so that we can be closer to God. That's a certain theology. But what this one does is says that fasting is more about clearing the way, clearing the path for us to get more in tune with God, with ourselves, and with each other. And in this fast-paced, clock-ticking world, we have created a pace of life that is not conducive to being connected a lot of times. And so this whole series is meant for us to dive deeper into that. Now, as I began to think about what the series would be like, I really had to sort of ask myself, how can I create something that is that's unique, that's profound, that's sensory rich, but also doesn't require a whole lot of preparation, like tons and tons of preparation, because there I am making you more busy. So there are things along the way that I have done to kind of strip things down, and hopefully with a little bit of preparation now, we have 3 more weeks this year, in the year that I'm recording this, than we did last year before Lent. And so it's a little bit more relaxed pace in getting ready for Lent. That's really good. But maybe if you can take some time to prepare now, by the time you get to Lent, you can actually have a more unbusy season yourselves. So I hope that this Get Ready webinar will help you prepare to do that, because I would really love it if you, as leaders of the church, could also experience and be on the same spiritual journey that you're asking your congregation to be on. And that is to fast from hurry and worry during Lent, and to really take a look at how we can reconnect with an unhurried God, which in turn helps us reconnect with each other and with ourselves. So the synopsis here for the series, the season of Lent has often been a time when we think about giving something up, a holdover from its penitential flavor in the medieval church. But what if we thought less about giving up and more about making room? In this Lent series, we will find out what it really costs to be so busy. Let us reconnect to an unhurried God. So what we're going to do in this webinar is I am going to first take you through all of the things that you will be downloading when you do this series. So whether you're a Worship Design Studio member, and for all of you who are members, it comes with your membership. So you're going to go into your account and you're going to go to that series and get the link to download those materials, remembering that there in that sticky note is the access code that you'll need. But if you are purchasing this a la carte because you're not a member, you will get an email that has that link and the access code, and you'll be downloading a whole lot of materials. So I'm going to take you through exactly what those materials are so you know what's there. Then I'm going to encourage you on a sort of pattern of how to prepare, and we're going to go through the actual order of worship for the first, for Lent 1, for the first service, so that you can actually see the order of worship and the things that are in there and get a really good sort of introduction to what you need to do to prepare. All right, so let's get started. Let me say something about this series and its origins. As many of you know, I am in this project, this 3-year-long project of creating fully scripted series for all 12 of the affirmations at thisweaffirm.org, which is a project of San Francisco Theological Seminary, where I am visiting professor in this time, and also myself, Worship Design Studio, and Darkwood Brew, my friend Eric Elness, and his small group video resources. So we're all collaborating on these 12 major affirmations, and we're creating what we're calling a living lectionary. So when all of these things are done, it's going to be a 3-year cycle that your church can go through. So you're getting kind of a head start. You're pioneers of some of these series as I create them. And so this one is based on principle number 11, affirmation number 11, which is about self-care. And it really says that, Jesus doesn't ask his followers to be consumed by the consumption and doing more and being more, and that is not the main point of being a Christian. Yes, we want to do things and make the world a better place, but here's the thing, is that even Jesus went away to the mountaintop to be by himself and to recharge and refuel. And Jesus took time in prayer, and Jesus took time to be with his followers. This meal practice that he was in that ultimately culminates in a Holy Week experience, and I'll talk about that and what I created for that. But being together with people, I really hope that maybe what you'll do for this series is you'll create dinner groups that meet during the time, even if it's just 2 or 3 families or couples or singles or whatever it is, but create sort of this rhythm. And 6 weeks is long enough to actually create a rhythm that you can then carry on into your lives outside of the Lent season, but of connecting and taking time and being with each other. So self-care is so important, and part of self-care, is that whole thing. Like on the plane, they say, if the oxygen mask comes down and there's somebody who needs help, put yours on first, right? Get your own oxygen breathing so that then you can help others, so that you don't run out of oxygen in the middle of trying to help someone who really needs help. All right, so it's a great metaphor for self-care. And so that's really the principle, and this series is on that. So in that collaboration with Eric, one of the things that you can also purchase separately is the small group video series that can just instantly be. It's a 30-minute little video that uses the same scripture that we're using in worship, but then it has guests that talk about the topic and gets into it. Now, you could use it in a couple different ways. You could actually use that in your dinner groups or your small groups, and use that as, watch it while you're having hors d'oeuvres, and then talk about it around the table as you're having dinner. You could use it in a typical small group format where you get together with folks. It doesn't involve dinner, or you can just use it as sermon fodder, as a way to get into and create your sermons. Additionally, you can get Eric's sermons that he actually preached when he did this series, and he has made those available for a nominal price. And a lot of people have been using those in this affirmations series that we're doing, and have said that it really helps jumpstart their own sermon preparation. So there's a lot of help out there for you in this series. Okay, so there is a video I'm going to put in the description, the YouTube description with this video, and in your small group resources document. There is a link to go look at a trailer of those small group videos, and I think you'll see the kind of depth and content there.
I think our hurried or busyness, our busyness that we do in our modern life is very connected to some deep fears we have. I think there are 4 fears probably that many of us have about enoughness. And our busyness drives us like addictive, compulsive people. And it's really hiding some questions. Do I have enough? Am I doing enough? Is God doing enough? And is God giving enough?
Let's be honest, folks, it's not practice, it's discipline, and none of us like discipline, you know? And so I think that's why we tend to shy away from adopting contemplative practice, because it feels like discipline, it doesn't feel like prayer. But I think unless we adopt those practices, find some sort of contemplative practice, I think we are sort of at the mercy of our compulsions.
I think we have to go beyond that tendency to battle constantly or to flee away. There's nothing wrong either with being in the struggle, and there's nothing wrong with time of meditation and reflection.
What does having all of these possessions mean? What does this mean for my life's purpose? What does this mean as a Christian? How do I reconcile, having wealth and having, and chasing after that, and reconcile that with the kinds of scripture passages which are not, isolated in scriptures, where Jesus is talking about possessions and talking about how they get in the way.
There's something called an action reflection loop, and the reflection loop is where all emotional intelligence is built.
Okay.
And organizations, we've been getting organizations to recognize that if they don't give people the chance for reflection, the action's going to be wrong. Because we always want people in action most of the time, but that takes us back to Sabbath. Sabbath reflection or literally rewires our brain.
You know what the average amount of silence in silent prayer is?
2.5 seconds.
Almost 9 seconds.
Wow.
9 seconds.
That's just terrible.
But so I talk about the doing and the being, that we have to have some being in our worship as well as the doing. And of course, the way I talk about it is, if you don't have the doing and the being, the do and the be and the do, all you have is the do. So I know that has to have a rim shot, right?
That's right.
So friends, the series starts with Ash Wednesday, and I used Busy, the main title. Week 1 is called The Right Tempo. Really gets into the idea that there is a right tempo for each of us, and that is perhaps different for each of us. So getting unbusy doesn't always mean for everybody that we're going to sit on the couch or meditate. It could also mean that we acknowledge what it is, the tempo of life for us, that gives us energy. For example, my mother is a certain kind of energy that when she is active, and she's super active in her 70s still, but that's what gives her energy, and that's why she's so healthy and full of life, is because she has kept up the kind of tempo that's right for her. Right? So we all have a right tempo. And so getting to know what is that home tempo, that home pattern that helps sustain our lives, right? And not feeling like we have to be like everybody else, or that everybody has to relax in the same way. And giving ourselves permission. This can come up a lot of times with families. You might not all relax in the same way. So you have to give each individual the opportunity to understand how it is, what it is that gives them life and recharges them. Week 2, preparing a table. This, we use Psalm 23 and the idea of preparing a table, that God sets a table, even in the difficult times, even in the face of enemies, right? As Psalm 23 says, well, the enemy could be the pace of your life, right? The enemy could be those things that suck the life out of you. But God continues to set that table and says, I've set the table. You're invited. Anytime you need sustenance, it's here, right? And so that is really the focus of week 2, preparing that table and knowing that table is there, and that we are invited to come at any moment. Week 3 is called tuning in. And tuning in is really, we spent actually all last Lent in the Listen series on this one subject, this tuning in. But that is, how is it that you can dial in to your connection with God and with each other and with yourself? And so tuning into life, tuning in, rediscovering the things that delight you, right? Sometimes we have our, what we call nose to the grindstone so much that we forget to raise up our heads, look around, especially true with as much time as we spend in our phones these days, in our technology. We are missing some of the things that perhaps used to delight us, and we forget that we need to tune into those things that are life-giving. So taking time to tune in is week 3. Week 4, living light. Now, this is something that, a few years ago, I went on the road in the RV for 2 years, and we cleaned out all the extraneous stuff of our lives and got it down to the bare essentials. And let me tell you what, as painful as that was a little bit, it was so incredibly freeing. We put some stuff in storage that didn't fit in the RV, and after 2 years, opened that storage and went, we haven't needed this stuff for 2 years. Wow. Even we pared way down, but even the stuff that we thought we couldn't let go of, we didn't touch for 2 years. So, there's this amazing new show on Netflix, you might have heard of it, called Tidying Up, by this wonderful woman who is Japanese. She has created this show that really ritualizes getting rid of stuff. And it's really wonderful. So it's in the sermon fodder document that I've created. And what I did is I researched all of these topics that we're talking about right now. And I looked for documentaries and shows and things that would help us to get into this subject. Not all of them are Christian or spiritual per se, but things like this show on Netflix where she is inviting people to go through every piece of clothing. One of the things that steps is clothing, and really she says, does this spark joy for you? Is that great? Does this spark joy? If it doesn't spark joy, thank it. Thank you very much. And then prepare to give it to someone for whom that will spark joy. Oh my gosh. I did a little Facebook Live right before I did this, and I did a little tour of my house here, and some of the things that, so go to my Facebook page, Marcia McFee's Facebook page, and take a look at that. One of the things I showed was my bookshelf. I gave away 14 boxes of books when I opened that storage locker and thought that I thought that I needed to keep all these books. I didn't miss them in 2 years, so I began to give them away. And I gave 14 boxes of books away to the women's prison. And that felt so amazing. So it's also not just letting go of things and uncluttering our lives and living lighter, but it's also how can those things that were dear to us for a while become dear and bless someone else's life. Okay, so week 5, a time for every matter. Well, you can tell already that's the Ecclesiastes scripture. And it really helps us to tune into the rhythms of life. There's a time for this and a time for that. And so really focusing there on the rhythm of our lives, the patterns of our lives. If I've had a season of my life where I've just been stressed for so long, and I'm wondering why I'm not happy, wondering why I feel depressed, well, let's take a look at the seasons of our lives and say, oh my gosh, dear Marcia, no wonder you're exhausted. You have been through a season of your life that brought a lot of stress or a lot of grief or whatever it is. And then to be kind and compassionate to ourselves. And when we do that in self-care, we can do that for others as well. We cannot assume that person is just being a pain, right? We can maybe stop and think, what season of their lives are they in that is creating this state of being for them? And perhaps have compassion and grace in that, right? So week 6 is Palm Sunday, and you say, oh, Palm Sunday, give it a rest. What the heck? Well, give it a rest really is about what cost is it that we are consuming the things of the planet, that we have this inequity of wealth that means that there are people in this world that have to work so many hours a day that that even just to make ends meet? This is a justice issue, right? Self-care is not just a sort of, oh, let me feel good kind of thing. There is a justice issue here in the way that we understand our relationship to the whole system, the whole ecosystem, the whole how our lives and our consumption affects the lives of other people, and the inequity. And that was so much what Jesus paraded about that day, right? And so give it a rest. Maybe that we need to give the status quo and the systems of oppression a rest so that those who are oppressed by those systems might have rest. Okay, so that's the crux of that one. And Holy Week, I went back to reconnecting with an unhurried God as that last. And so in Holy Week, I have created, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it in just a moment, I've created an experience that sort of draws on that hope that people will get together and enjoy each other's company. And so I've created something for being around tables. Okay, so that's the lineup. Now, let me tell you what is in the downloads around to create all of that. All right, so you're going to get a pre-Lent retreat. Okay, let me tell you what happened here. This is so amazing. As I began to work on Ash Wednesday, and I always design the 6 Sundays of Lent first, and then I go back and I do Ash Wednesday because I want to know what I'm doing before I do Ash Wednesday so that I can sort of create something that's prepping us for that whole journey. And then I do Holy Week. So when I got to doing Ash Wednesday, I was doing some surfing around resources and things. And I found out that the National Day of Unplugging, which has been going on for about 10, 11 years, is the weekend right before Ash Wednesday. Oh my gosh, so cool. Okay, what is the National Day of Unplugging? It is an organization, originally a Jewish organization, but it's become ecumenical, that created this 24-hour fast from technology. So the National Day of Unplugging, to bring focus to our relationships, to bring focus to all of the things that this whole series is about. So it's like, oh my gosh, this is too good. So I decided to create a 24-hour pre-Lent retreat. Doesn't mean you have to stay overnight, although you might want to do a youth lock-in. Oh my God, I loved youth lock-ins when I was a youth at the church. But it does start Friday, so it's Friday from sundown to Saturday sundown. So it's using sort of that Jewish Sabbath, right? But so I've created a retreat to, sort of launch this Busy series, and it will be an act of unplugging, right? So I'll say a little bit more about that in just a moment. But Ash Wednesday mini retreat. So what I did is I said, okay, if a church can't do a whole 24-hour thing and that just feels like too much, then let me condense that down into a 3-hour experience that includes a ritual of ashes. So that could be like a 5:30 to 8:30 on Ash Wednesday night, right? So you get some of that retreat-like thing with your Ash Wednesday. So that's a condensed version. Then I also just did a plain old Ash Wednesday worship, right? So you have choices there. So you could do like the pre-Lent retreat on the weekend before and then just the Ash Wednesday worship, or you could do just the Ash Wednesday mini 3-hour retreat. Okay, then there's the 6 weeks of Lent, all the scripts for that, and then there's a Holy Week experience that I'm going to tell you about. Now, we also, as those of you who have done my fully scripted series know, we also put together a document of visual and media ideas. We created a video trailer for you to use in your publicity. You might have seen this. It's starting to play on social media, our advertising about the series, but we took that same series trailer, took off our stuff at the end, so you just have blank space where you can put your information, and we want you to use that on your social media, on your web page, however it is that you get the word out. Go ahead and use that, because we know that's how a lot of people, go, oh my gosh, my life is out of control. Let me go check this out, right? Call it evangelism, call it publicity, it doesn't matter. So use that video trailer for publicity. We give you a logo, right? So you can use that. You can put your own information on it. You can also feel free to make your own logo, right? So we provide you with these things, but there's nothing to say that you can't sort of tweak it and make it your own. All right, music suggestions we give for choirs, bands, ensembles, but let me tell you something about this, and that is we want it to be less busy for your musicians. So we did not load this up with a lot of new music, actually no new music, except if the theme song is unfamiliar to your folks, but we use a really familiar tune. It's Beach Spring, come and find the quiet center. Such a perfect song. And so we just decided to use that rather than create new music, have you all learn new music. We really want you to be less busy in putting this together. All right, small group suggestions and individual prayer practices. We're giving you those, and I'll tell you more about that. So you're downloading that. Let's take a look. The first thing I want you to do is look at, and I have numbered these resources with numbers in front of them. So when you download them, hopefully they download into a folder that has all the numbers, because that's the order that I want you to look at these things, or at least it's a helpful order. Of course, your visual artist might immediately go to the visual and media packet, but I want to encourage everybody to be on board with the theme. So look at those synopses and scriptures. Get an idea of the whole of the theme before you look at anything else, right? Then there's an overview of the order of worship. And I do this so that I can help you see actually what I'm going to be doing later on as I go through the order of worship. But I tell you a little bit about why I put things in that order or some of the thinking behind it. And when you know the thinking behind my design, it's so much easier to prepare, and it's so much easier to understand the way things are rather than looking at a script immediately. So I really encourage you to look at that overview first. Oftentimes we get questions, and that's great. We love getting questions, but sometimes those questions could be answered by this overview. So be sure that you look at that first. It will really help you as you prepare. All right, so then you will get the PreLit Retreat for March 1st and 2nd. And what I've done here is I've pulled out the schedule that I created. So, of course, you can adapt this for any schedule, but this is the way that I put this together. So Friday night you would get together from 6 to 8. It includes a dinner, do it potluck, do whatever, but there's conversation around the tables. And so that sort of gets people into the feel of it. You ceremoniously turn off your technology, all that kind of stuff. So then, these 4 things are actually using the 4 movements of each order of worship for the whole series. So taking a breather is our gathering, taking note, Saturday from 10 to noon. And I have given you some small group things that you could do. So you could watch a documentary about living more minimalistically, or you could watch the tidying up thing, or you could watch, there's so many different documentaries that are so awesome that you can watch together as a small group and discuss. So you could do that, and then in the afternoon after lunch, and we suggest that you have lunch items there, but then let people sort of eat on their own, right? A different kind of rhythm. They've been talking a lot to people, so allow them to maybe, if you have places to go out into the sunshine, if you have sunshine. I know some of you are like super cold today and snowed in. I'm glad you're spending your time with me while you're snowed in. But if weather permits, so just that hour to give people some alone time, maybe some journaling time, what have you. And then the afternoon, they can switch to another small group and look at another aspect of becoming less busy. But there's also some really cool activities then that in the last session, you can make your God box, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. And then you can create all kinds of different things to help you with your ritual practices through the season. So that's what the PreLit Retreat is. So take a look at that, see if that's something you want to do. With that, what you're going to download are some materials from the National Day of Unplugging. Now, these folks are awesome. I contacted them, and I said, there's a couple of tweaks that I want to make in your materials. Is that okay? Because they were certain things that were specifically Jewish, And which is fine, it's great, but I wanted to sort of make it more connected to churches who are on Christian path. And so they were like, yes, please. So we made a couple of adaptations. So you're going to download those, and these are they're sort of like playing cards that you can print off and cut out. And these are things for people to use at dinner at the first night. It's sort of prompts to help them talk about their lives and what the pace of their lives is. There's name tags. This is, I unplugged to connect with my family. I unplugged to read more, or I unplug, whatever it is. So you're right away when you come in the door, you're thinking about, why do I want to unplug? Okay, so there's all of those resources as well. And then we give you some ideas of what you can do as activities in that pre-Lent retreat. And so this can be multi-generational, right? So there's some really fun things that kids could do during those times. So just tons of stuff. One of the things that we've got in there is to create a communal Lent calendar. Advent calendars are so popular. And so we thought, what if part of being unbusy was to have some prompt every day, besides sitting in your prayer chair, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, but some prompt for families or people who are adults to do every day. And you could create that Lent calendar actually by having people write just an idea of what you could do. And then somebody collects those and creates a Lent calendar to hand out then the first Sunday in Lent. To everybody, and it's made up of things that were communally constructed, ideas from everybody about how to take time and get a little bit less busy. All right, so that's an idea. Now, Ash Wednesday 3-hour mini retreat, you're going to download that, and you're going to see that I've taken some of the activities from that longer retreat, and I've taken some of the things from the Ash Wednesday service, and I've put them together in a 3-hour time block that could be a little mini retreat that has the ritual of ashes in it. And then, of course, the Ash Wednesday worship, which is a worship service that has the ashes in it, but it also has preparing the ideas for our 2 ways that we're going to fast from hurry and worry. Right? So our prayer chair and our God box. So that will get introduced in that Ash Wednesday service as well. Okay, so then you're going to download the 6 weeks of Lent, all of these scripts. And again, I want to take this opportunity to say to you, and I say this all the time, but sometimes people don't hear me. I want you to adapt these things to what will work the best for your place. All right. So sometimes people email me or they put on the Facebook page, we couldn't do everything, as if they're apologizing for it. No, I just give you like the full meal deal, and then you create what works for you. Really, really adapt these things. My biggest hope is that what I'm giving you is simply a framework for you to get excited about doing the work of tailor making it for your place. So please know that is, I can't know the particulars of all of your churches. I can just put it out there and then let you use that as a framework. All right, so then the Holy Week experience you'll download as well. Now let me tell you, there's going to be 2 different kinds. There's an agape feast version and a communion version. The agape feast version is if you decide to do this in homes, all right? So the Holy Week experience is meant to be something that's a little bit unusual that you have never perhaps done before at your church. And what I want to suggest to you is that you decide maybe to do this, but also to do something that's very traditional, that's a time-honored tradition. So not this in place of everything that's traditional about your Holy Week, but just see this as something that is, that could be something different for you. Now, if your folks are just yearning for something different and you just want to make this the one thing you do in Holy Week, awesome. But you have to make that decision. Now, if you do it in small groups, in homes, you may be part of a tradition that says you don't do communion unless you have a clergy present. And so in that case, you're going to do the agape feast version, which is very similar, but it doesn't It refers to the meals of Jesus rather than just the Last Supper. It's going to allude to that, of course. It's Holy Week. But it's going to really do it in a way that makes it possible for anyone to lead it, for the host to be anyone, not just a clergy person. Now, if you have a small enough church, and we have some very small churches who are part of the Worship Design Studio, I love it, and they adapt it for their community. But here's one of the great things about being a small church is that you could actually have it at somebody's home that could hold all of you, right? And then you would have the clergy present, and then you could do the communion version in somebody's home. So just because there's the communion version doesn't mean you have to do it in the church. Now you could, if you do it in the church and you do it all together, I still want you to be around tables because it does involve eating together, right? So you'll perhaps use the fellowship hall or whatever it is, whatever space you can to be around tables. So read through both of those and figure out what you'd like to do with yours, whether you want to have it at the church or whether, maybe if you do dinner groups through this whole thing, where you value, the community and the depth of what happens when you meet regularly with friends and talk about the deepest things we know, you may want to have that be what those small groups do, because that sort of gives them closure and it gives them a way to ritualize the wonderful depth that they've come to. Now, you'll see when you read it that you want to invite people to bring a candle. That's the only thing they need to bring unless you're making it potluck. But they bring a candle, a freestanding candle. And when they come, you're going to have some place in your house, maybe in the living room as opposed to the dining room, a small table where you can make a cluster of candles. And you will have an opening and a closing ritual there. So you'll have opening ritual there as you light the candles. You'll eat. You'll have some things around the table that you'll be doing. And then you'll come back in for that closing ritual. And you'll be taking that candle out with you. So I'm super excited about this. I need to tell you that I created this sitting in that chair right there. That's my prayer chair. And when we talk more about prayer chairs, you'll understand what I mean. But that's my prayer chair. I took it in the RV with me for 2 years. I created this Holy Week experience in the prayer chair and in front of the fireplace here. And I just was so moved imagining people coming together for this Holy Week moment. I have come to just love the depth of Holy Week. And I usually try to do some things in Holy Week that are even more set apart time than I do during Lent, to see it as a real time period of going deep. And so I hope that will be so for you using these experiences. All right, so then one of the things about the God box where we're going to be putting our worries all through Lent, hang on, we're still going to talk more about that. But one thing about that is that when you do something ritualistic like putting your worries in this God box, writing down your worries, giving it over to God, you don't want to just stop doing it. You need a ritual to bring that to a close. And so the Easter Vigil, which is a Saturday night kind of thing, or you could use it at sunrise service on Easter morning, I've created a closing ritual with using the ancient tradition of doing a bonfire. So whether that's inside, if your church has a fireplace, or outside in a bonfire that you create, we're going to ritually burn those worries in the fire and celebrate the first light of Easter, right? So it is this ancient tradition that talks about the darkness of the tomb giving way to light. And that's what you light your Paschal candle from, which is, liturgical term is big honkin' candle, right? So if you don't have a big honkin' candle, a Paschal candle to light, I'm going to invite you to get one. It doesn't have to be something special from with a symbol on it. It can be, but it could just be a big pillar candle. And you can get these at Home Goods, at Michael's, at many different places. But get a big pillar candle that you can light on that night and use in Easter morning. Now, let me talk about Easter. A lot of people have been asking me if this series has an Easter service. Depending on the theme of my Lent series, I either create an Easter service or I don't. And it has absolutely to do with what the theme is and what the feel of it is. So, for instance, a couple of years ago, I created a series called Roll Down Justice. And it looked at baptismal rituals all through Lent. And it looked at issues of being called to make the world a better place, issues of justice. Well, it had big energy, right? And so it was obvious that Easter, I wanted to make an Easter service that continued some of those threads from the series. But for this one, and for like last year, listen, the threads, what I mean by threads, those things that repeat, like the theme song and the ways that we do worship, that gives it its flavor of the season, they're more contemplative. They're not as celebrative, right? They're a different feel. And so I did not create Easter service for this series because Easter can also be seen as the first Sunday of the Easter series, the Easter season, which is a 50-day season, right? We often think Easter is the end of something, and then we don't really get a sense of Easter to Pentecost as a season. So this year, if you're using this series, Busy, I want you to think of Easter season as starting with Easter. Now, March 14th, I am going to do a webinar on all the possibilities that you could do for the Easter season. All right, so just, hang on, don't worry too much about Easter being the culmination. Now, that's why this ritual is for either Saturday night Easter Vigil or sunrise service. So think about sunrise service as the end of Lent into the beginning of the Easter season. All right, so I hope that makes sense. Okay, so little ritual there. Now, all the scripts come in both PDF and Word versions. We do that so that you can have a PDF, of course, as you can't change it, right? So we want you to have a copy of what the original script was that you got. And the Word version is there so that you can actually get in there and do those adaptations and adapt it for your setting and mix it up. And so if for some reason you delete something and then you go, oh gosh, you know what? We need to put that back in. You can go back to the PDF and see what it was that you deleted. Okay, so that's why we give you both of those versions, the PDF and the Word version. We also like to make one of them pretty, right? The PDF version is pretty because we want you to have it on your computer, and as you're reading through it the first time, we just think aesthetically to sort of get you into what the feel of the series is. Jenna makes these, we call them now she does proofing and primping of my scripts, and I am so grateful. And she puts those beautiful graphics behind there because and you'll notice in each one of these scripts, there's a chair there because that's our anchor image. Okay, so also you're going to get hanging out children's suggestions. Okay, let's talk about children in this series. So you'll see in the order of worship that hanging out is what we call the children's time. And what I did is I researched techniques that people are using to help children find ways to shift their energy. All right, so there are super cool things like these glitter made out of water bottles where you can shake them up and then you watch the glitter sort of slowly come to the bottom. And as you do that, you feel your energy, right? There's just, every week we have a suggestion of something that you could do. And so that is what we've suggested for children. Now, you could actually have them make these things maybe in Sunday school the week before and then show them at the next service where we have that slated. That's one rhythm you could do if you wanted to have them create it, or you can just create it for them and then they can encounter it in that. You could have children make that during your PreLit Retreat, make some of these things in preparation to pull them out. And you could say, oh, we're making these things and you're going to see them come back every Sunday. So create some anticipation. So they're really awesome ideas, and especially these glitter things. I want to make one. I'm going to make one of my own, actually. And it's really this sort of meditation thing where you can watch this glitter just kind of slowly come to the bottom. A really great way when kids are having a timeout, of giving them something that shifts their energy. You know, energy is real. And so usually when kids are needing a timeout, it's because we're like, right? We need to shift the energy. And so that's what I look for. There's a really cool thing for Palm Sunday where kids do cutouts of their hands, and then you put them on a dowel stick like this, and they make palm branches. And they're so cool. I've never seen those. And so, yeah, those are all really great. Okay. So children's suggestions. Now, visual and media suggestions. Jen is so great at putting these together. And I can see in the chat box that y'all are talking about the images. Jenna pulls them all from places where they are royalty-free, permission-free. You know, you don't pay for them. It's just this amazing collection of websites, most of them from unsplash.com. And at the bottom of the visual and media suggestions document, she has a whole list of places where she's gotten pictures. And so you can just go there and create your own slide backdrops. You can do all kinds of things. So our anchor image for this series is the prayer chair. And so when I was looking for an anchor image, which is the main symbol or metaphor, the empty chair spoke to me because it evokes kind of come and just chill for a second. Right? And so that empty chair became the main thing. And so during worship, you're going to see, and I'll tell you as we go through the scripts, you're going to see that we're going to pray from a prayer chair in the chancel. We want a chair that's special. So you might want to paint one, you know, get a used one, an Adirondack chair or a rocking chair, paint it especially. We talk about that in the visual document. You might want to have prayer shawls. If you have a knitting group or a prayer shawl ministry, or maybe it's a great time to start one. We put that in the visual document. You might want to have that. And so we suggest different things for you to do with that chair in the chancel. We also suggest that you keep your visual installation, i.e. table or altar setting, simple. All right. So oftentimes we're suggesting some sort of more elaborate things. But for this one, both because your visual team, we want them to not work so hard, and because visually we want that unbusy or uncluttered thing to actually come through in the visuals. So using a flower arrangement, you can see here on the slide, flower arrangement that's just very simple. Maybe it's just a couple of stems of something, but something that's uncluttered. One image you could use is of a clock, and you see that here. Find yourself a big clock that you can take the hands off of, right? One of the things in the service that is a thread or a repeated thing at the beginning is to invite people to take their watches off. People who wear watches anymore, or on the alternative, turn their phones off. And so there's a place in the service to do that as a symbol of committing ourselves to just focusing on God and reconnecting with the unhurried God. And so you might, if you can find a clock face, you might make it so that you can take the hands off at that moment. So you also have a visual symbol of time out of time, right? Taking time. And then, of course, we've got some suggestions for the God box, which is what we're going to use. You can make it out of Kleenex boxes, any sort of boxes, but you can put your worries in that, all through that. And there will be a God box in the sanctuary that you could use during children's times as well. But also we're suggesting people decorate those to have at home to actually put their worries in every day. So we've got ideas about that. Media-wise, we make a suggestion that you look for, and you can find these free videos, the series trailer that I made where there's like these time lapse where it's like fast motion. You can download those free, and then it transforms from that into something that evokes busy or play or rest or relaxation. And so what we suggest is if you have some people who love to make videos, that they create something for the beginning of worship that does that kind of transformation in just like 1 minute, right? All right, so let's go on to the next one. We created prayer chair pages that you're going to download. Now, the prayer chair pages are for people to have at home to use in their prayer chair every day. And what the prayer chair pages consist of are a prayer that is the same part of the prayer that they will hear in worship. Only I changed it from the communal we that you use in worship to an I statement in the prayer chair pages that people will use at home. So that they can use, there's this connection. Anytime I can get a connection between worship and individual prayer practices at home, it's really awesome to reinforce, because the brain goes back and it recalls worship, and it just keeps that in our bodies. So the first part of that is a prayer that will be recognizable from the Sunday before. And how awesome if people have this and they have to miss a Sunday, they still get some of that sentiment from that Sunday during their week. And then there's a place for them to write down what they are worried about or who they're thinking of or praying about, and then a prayer to finish that. So it's just a guided way to have a meditation in the prayer chair. You might invite people to have a candle there and light it as part of their ritual, or whatever it is. They might add their own rituals to that. But it's a way of taking time every day as a Lent practice. So we've given you some things for that. All right, so music notes are just going to help you understand the choices that we made, some things about how we hear the instrumentation working, and also a little bit about the choices we made for hymns and songs. What I tried to do is to choose really super familiar songs. This is also part of being unbusy, right? So that your musicians don't have to spend a ton of time in rehearsal, that they have time to also be a little unbusy. Maybe during choir practice and band practice during this time, you get to have more time perhaps to be in prayer together or check in with each other. Take more personal time with each other rather than just cramming in learning new music. So for the same reason, I have also suggested that you use offertories, anthems that you've done before for the very same reason. And so you want to pay attention to the theme and such, but look at what's already in your repertoire. Or if there's just nothing there, something maybe that your choir just does out of the hymnal and does it in beautiful parts so that we can just listen to it, right? So think, music directors, really think, how can I create something that makes our time in rehearsal less stressful, makes my time in preparation for the series less stressful? Of course, if there's something that you were already planning that you were excited about, do it, right? It's all about having less stress so that you get to decide that. But this is the reason why I have not chosen anthems, offertories, that kind of thing for you for this series, because I want you to pull from your repertoire. Okay, now Chuck Bell, whose picture you see here, who is my music collaborator on most of these series, he is right now working on some piano solos, some that you can either play or play the recording, some accompaniment tracks that he usually does for these series. So if you are without a musician, people have begun to use his accompaniment tracks to some things. And so he's working on those. You will be able to find those at chuckbellmusic.com. And we will send out an email to all of you when those are ready so that you can go check those out. All right. Sermon fodder, small group suggestions. I've already made some comments about this, but what I want you to know about this is that for every week, I have given you some things for you to look at that will really spur your sermon preparation. Now, besides the small group videos from Darkwood Brew that you could purchase separately, or Eric's sermons that you could purchase separately, I have given you sort of what is the gist of the sermon message so that you can have that in front of you and then begin to compile your sermon based on steeping yourself in these either articles, books, documentaries, all these things that I put just tons of links in there. And here's what I would love for you to do. I would love for you and your team, as you prepare, even before you begin making decisions about exactly what you're going to do, I would love for you to check out some of these links, watch some of these things, begin to get steeped in it. And if you're starting now, you're going to have enough time to do this, because it will help you be in the mindset so that when you start to do the tasks of actually putting worship together, the task of actually writing your sermon, you have lived this a little bit in your own life. So that's my suggestion. So there's tons of suggestions, materials, fodders in that. Again, we give you a series trailer video. You will be downloading that. Now, the overview of worship, as I said, read that first before you read anything else. It will help situate you. And then begin to go through all of these documents. All right, so let me stop for just a moment, see if there are questions that Jenna has not been able to answer. I see that she's answering questions as they come up, which is awesome. We had questions about photos, about editing videos. Yeah, I use something called ScreenFlow. I use iMovie. iMovie comes with a Mac, the Windows Movie Maker. It's just amazing how we have these editing tools at our disposal. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any and so I'm going to take a little time going through the first Sunday of Lent. For those of you who can stay on, we've been going an hour. Usually I try to keep it to that, but oh my gosh, I think if you want to stay on, or maybe pause it if you're watching the recording and come back to it, I'm going to take you through that first Sunday so I can just give you some particulars about that. So I don't see any questions, so let's just keep going and stay with me as long as you can. Okay. So Nancy was asking about some of the other scriptures. I see that. So that would be in the scriptures and synopses document. And if you're just wondering if you're going to purchase it, you haven't purchased it yet, you can still see all of that if you go to worshipdesignstudio.com/busy, which is where you can purchase that. We have on that page a link so that you can look at both the overview and the scriptures and synopses, even before you purchase it, while you're trying to figure that out. Great. All right. No, they are not lectionary. This is a non-lectionary series. We do have in the Worship Design Studio a lectionary series for this year called The Way, and it's based on the movie The Way, and it's focused on pilgrimage. So if you're a Worship Design Studio member, you have access to that. All right. We do community Lent services at various churches. Would you recommend using material from series or standalone services? Ooh, how cool is that? Okay, so here's what I would do if I were you. I would, when it comes time for your church, I would totally use the Holy Week experience to give people a little taste of what you've been doing, because it doesn't require that you've been through the entire series. It will have more depth of meaning for people who have. But I think when you read the Holy Week experience, I think the people in your community, when they come to your church, you would be giving them something really unique. And I think they would love it. And it would be really cool. If you do that, let me know. I would love to hear how that goes. Awesome. Okay. So keep those questions coming if you have more, and I'm just going to keep moving on. So I'm looking at the first page of the script for Lent 1. As I said, the gather, proclaim, respond, and send forth, those main four traditional movements of the service, I call taking a breather, taking note, taking care, and taking it out. So taking a breather is the gathering part of the service. And what I did in here, I called a threshold moment. And it's called Slow It Down. And so he starts with a clock ticking sound. And actually, I've put that in your downloads as well. It's a royalty-free sound effect, and it's tick, 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 tick. So you could play that over your audio. And then I have created for every service a drama of sorts, a little short dramatic thing for 3 voices. They could be the same 3 voices throughout or different voices, but they're kind of to get us to laugh at ourselves, right? So voice 1 stands up from somewhere just in the congregation and says to number 2, who's maybe across the sanctuary, "Yoo-hoo, how are you?" And voice 2 says, "I'm so busy," right? Badge of courage, I'm so busy, right? And voice 3 pops up and says, "You can say that again." And so voice 2 says, "I'm so busy." And then voice 3 says, "I didn't really mean that literally, just that I know what you mean. I keep meeting myself coming and going." And voice 1 says, "Woo, indeed. When will the rat race end?" Right? So it's just a little short thing, but it's to sort of get us to sort of look at the subject. And I have tweaked this so that each Sunday it kind of it's toward what aspect of the theme that we're doing that day, right? So I had a blast putting this together. So fun. Okay, so then what happens is that the pastor gives kind of an idea of the theme coming up, introduces that. And I love to, for those of you who haven't done my series before, I love for the pastor to be a spiritual director at the very beginning of the service, sort of setting the stage for what is this theme that we're doing, so that the whole service can feel like it's a proclamation, not just waiting till the sermon and saying, "We're doing a sermon series, blah, blah, blah." I don't use sermon series. I call it worship series. And then that goes into our theme. So the tick, tick, ticking kind of fades out after the little drama. The pastor begins to speak. The music can come in underneath so that we begin to change the feel. And then we sing verse 1, "Come and find the quiet center." And this is, if your congregation doesn't know it, they're going to know it very quickly. And what I've done is I've used the 3 verses of "Come and Find the Quiet Center" interspersed at beginning, middle, and end of the service. So it's the same tune. It's uncluttered so that we don't have a whole bunch of different music going on. And so I think you're really going to enjoy that repetition. So catching our breath is that moment where you invite people to a deep breath and you invite them to take their watch off, turn their phone off, right? And so the verbiage for this is the same every Sunday. But let me say to you, pastors, when you get to the 3rd, 4th, 5th Sunday, you might want to change up the language just a little bit. You don't have to, none of these leader parts that I write do you have to do verbatim, right? I'm writing them out so that if you want to, you can read them verbatim. What I hope is actually that you will practice them and tweak them so that it comes out in your own voice, right? So consider my language, sort of saying it how I would say it, and then you kind of adapt it as you go along, even though what I have in there repeats every Sunday. Prayer for clearing out. Now, one of the things I like to do is have verbal threads. And so a verbal thread is when the congregation says the same response each week, but the leader parts change. And that's true for this prayer for clearing out. So the first Sunday says, "Let us pray a prayer for clearing out. Spacious God, we come today hoping for tools to sweep away the stress." The people say, "Let us make room for you. Nudge us in this time of worship to seek the things that really matter. Let us find room for you. Help us to claim our own selves as a holy sanctuary where you dwell. Let us be room for you. In the name of Jesus, who invites us to wholeness. Amen." So let us make room, find room, be room, and then in the name of Jesus, who invites us to wholeness. Amen. Those are all exactly the same for every service, but the leader words change. So you get that sort of repetition, that familiar rhythm throughout the series. Then there's the opening song, and then inviting people to pass the peace. And what I've done is I've given you, if you want to use this, a question that you can invite people to start a conversation. You might give them a little more time to do this. The first one, when was the last time you had a chance to catch your breath? Right? So it requires just a little bit of a conversation. So it's not going to be, "Hi, how are you?" with a whole bunch of people, but it may just be turning to somebody else and hearing their answer, and having it be just a little moment of connection as the piece. All right. So then we go into the second section, taking note. And this is the scripture, sermon, and the children's time. So there you have your hanging out, and I talked about that before. You can use this first verse of take time to be holy, speak oft with the Lord, right? You could use that as the children come up each time. Now, you're going to look at the children's document for the suggestions for each week on that. Then there's scripture. If you have a tradition of doing more than one scripture every week, I just invite you to add to this. I'm giving you the main scripture that it's focused around, but feel free to add another scripture reading if that's what you would like to do. So this one, we call it reconnecting, and that's scripture. So from Matthew, and then I call the anthem or the band song from the playlist, right? So from the playlist means that, these are ones you've heard before because we pulled it out of repertoire. But we know that you really enjoyed it before, so we're going to bring it back up, kind of thing. So from the playlist. You could even make a playlist, actually. This is something that I write about in the music document. You could actually make a playlist of songs about taking time, about that are restful or what have you, that are towards the theme. You can do that on Spotify and share playlists. So that could be a really cool thing to do, and then invite people to listen to the playlist as they walk or any of their Lenten disciplines. Okay, focusing on the main thing, that's the sermon. And I talked about the sermon fodder that I've given you in that download. Okay, we go into the third part, which is taking care. And that is where we will do prayer, offering, and communion if you do communion every Sunday or on the Sunday that you do communion. So prayer is done in this way. I call it time out in the prayer chair. So confession, there's a bit of confession in this prayer, and so it's like getting a timeout, right? I'm so delighted by this metaphor. I hope you are too. But I wrote a little piece there, sort of connecting it. I said, if you raise children or are raising children, or even if you haven't or aren't, you've heard of a timeout. We give a timeout when a break is needed. Perhaps we need to think about the consequences of an action, or we just need to break the intensity. Perhaps we are spiraling emotionally and need some perspective. Perhaps we just need to get quiet so we can change the course of action. In this series, we are giving ourselves a timeout, and we are sending ourselves to the prayer chair. So timeout can actually be turned around and looked at as a really positive thing, right? So what I suggest is that you say that, Pastor, and then you go and you sit in the prayer chair in the chancel. And then you begin your prayer. Now, I have written a beginning part of the prayer because that is the part that I have then also put in the prayer chair pages that people will take home. So I've written a beginning of the prayer, and then I say go on in your pastoral prayer so that you can make it specialized for your community and your community's concerns. So that you'll do the prayer from the prayer chair. You might even want to, as you talk about concerns, you may even want to pick up the God box and put it in your lap and, talk about the concerns. And maybe even if you are in the habit of collecting prayer concerns from people, you may do that in the way that you do that earlier in the service. And then as you pray, you might put them in the God box, right? So it models that. So lots of different ways that you could interpret that. Okay, so then what happens before that prayer is that we do that second verse. Now, music directors, it comes out of a little bit of silence. And Beach Spring can be played really straight. And most of the time, the accompaniment that you see in songbooks or hymn books is pretty straight. Dun 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 dun. Right? That's not the way we want it here, especially. We want to take it out of that, and we want to. What I usually do in the second verse, and I love it this way, if you have somebody who can pull this off, is to have a soloist come in a cappella, or maybe give them a first note, Silence is a friend who claims us, cools the heat and slows the pace. Right? So rubato like crazy, right? So taking it out of time, solo voice that's breaking the silence, doing the first two lines, and then maybe the choir comes in or congregation comes in on making space within our thinking, lifting shades to show the sun. And then you're back into a gentle tempo there. I see a question, assuming wireless mic to pray while sitting in a chair away from the mic at the pulpit. Yes, absolutely. And so, yeah, exactly. So if you don't have a sound system that has a movable mic or a wireless mic, have a mic that's on a stand that is corded that you can maybe just sit by the chair and pull off and use, or move your chair down close to the people so that, you know, don't have the chair way up here. Have the chair down by the people so you're like all together. That could be very cool as well. So you just have to figure it out for your space. All right, so then the prayer happens, and then you pray the pastoral prayer. Okay, so the offering is next. I call it noticing what's important. And so you could do an offertory here, or you could do a testimony from someone about how they are making more space in their lives, making their lives less busy. You know, you could do many things there. Actually, I forgot to go to this slide next, so let me just talk about it here. This is the picture of my prayer chair. So even though we have hard chairs, like pictures of that in the visual arts document, you might want to find a cushy one, kind of like my chair, an armchair kind of thing that evokes a chair you might have at home. You might do the painted chair like we have there with a something written on it. So this chair that I found that had slats on the back and then somebody had painted 3 things on it, I thought you could make a chair that says, has lettering on it, leave your hurry, leave your worry, find rest. Now, how cool would it be if you did that, and then during the week, if you are on if your church is somewhere where you could have that sitting outside the church, it's for people to just sit down in it if they wanted to, as they pass by. It might be just like this invitation to the world to leave your hurry, leave your worry, find rest. So that's kind of a evangelism thing that you could play with. You might take that chair and take pictures of it all around town and have it in different places. Of course, you might have to get permission of a shopkeeper to put it in front of their shop or what have you. But it would be super cool to make that a project that you take that somewhere and let it be for a day and see what happens. I don't know, kind of cool. All right. So there's the prayer chair pages, the God box. Okay, so offering, I have written a doxology, and this one is to Old 100th, so it's a very familiar tune. For time to savor God's good gifts, for space to breathe and hearts to lift, for ways to reach out and to give, we offer thanks and vow to live. All right, so it brings the theme. Oftentimes I like to take a part of worship that we do over and over and over again and thematize it, right? So that's what I've done with the doxology here. Now, family time is what I'm calling communion. If you do communion every week, you would put communion there. If you just do it on the first Sunday of the month, let's say, you would put it there. You might choose, even though for this Lent, the preparing a table service is not on the first Sunday of a month, you might decide you want to do communion because of the theme. So you could put it there. I have done, in the downloads, I have done a separate communion prayer document so that you can insert that wherever. I didn't put it in a certain Sunday. Because there'll be some of you who are watching this who are not doing this in 2019. You're doing it in a different year. So it would fall on a different Sunday anyway. So that's where you would put communion. And again, the communion prayer is I use the sort of ecumenical form that's based on the 2nd century Hippolytus prayer with all these certain parts of it. And so if your tradition has other parts that need to get switched around or needs to get added or what have you, please, again, adapt for your tradition. Okay. So communion, taking it out is the last section. Closing song, again, finding something familiar. What I've done is I've made suggestions for a more classic traditional song, hymn, and a more contemporary song. I've tried to use things that are pretty popular right now or have been popular, so they're recognizable from the contemporary. It may be that a contemporary song that I chose actually is something that's familiar to your traditional folks as well, or vice versa. And so you might use either one of them, or neither one of them might be your cup of tea. And so what I've done with each song choice is that I have said, here was my theological reason for choosing these songs. So find something else that maybe has to do with connected life with God, which is what this closing song is. All right, invitation to Lenten practices, just reminding people about their prayer chairs, telling them where they can get their prayer chair pages, maybe use that as an insert, maybe it's a handout they can get on the way out. And then the blessing for an unhurried life is our benediction each time. And the first part of it is unique to that service. And the second part of it is the same each service. And so in this one, may the tempo of your journey, this is for the right tempo, right? This is the first Sunday called the right tempo. May the tempo of your journey be just right. May you seize the day, but also savor the moment. May your life be the one you live and not just watch passing by. Now this part that's different for number 1. This part will be the same for each Sunday. And may you be reacquainted each day with an unhurried God who is calling you to dive deeply into love. All right, so that is something that repeats each time that will become really special because it does get repeated. And then verse 3 of our theme song is done. And the verse 3, the theology of it is more uplifting. And so you'll want to do that in a very different feel, a more sweeping feel. In the Spirit, let us travel, open to each other's pain. La da 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 da. Right? So each time you do a verse of that song, it's going to feel a little bit different. And we want it to be a little bit more uplifting as we go out, the energy up. Okay. Woohoo! Oh my gosh, we did it. We did it, friends. Okay. Do we have any questions? Marta says we have communion every week. I really like having the separate communion document to put in a specific place. Yeah. Awesome. Yay. And you will be able to adapt it for each week. And I really want you to do that. Those of you who do communion every week, it's a perfect time. It's a perfect way to exercise your creative muscles and draw a little bit of the theme of that week into tweaking the language. So you could keep some of it the same and then tweak some of it to go with that week, which is exactly the way that the technique that I use in creating these whole series. Okay. All right. Krista says, I'm unfamiliar with song select use. Okay, so song select is CCLI. A CCLI license is one that covers most of your contemporary Christian music. If you're using other music, you probably have a 1 license. But CCLI covers most of the contemporary music. And when you go to Song Select online, that is CCLI's database. You can either be a guest or you can have a membership. You probably want a membership if you're using a lot of contemporary music because you have a license anyway. But you can still search there. And I have, so you go to Song Select and then you can search by song number. And I've put all the numbers in there. You can search by the name or the number and it will take you to that song and you can listen to a snippet of it. You know, another thing you can do is just go to YouTube and put in that song name and listen to it that way as well. Okay, so glad that you all could join me. If you have any questions beyond this, please email us, marcia@marciamcfee.com, and we will get back to you. I pray many blessings on your Lent season. And friends, I know we've covered a lot and it feels like a lot of details right now, but believe me, if you take the time, number one, to steep in the theme yourself, get to that place. And this is the same process that I went through in creating this. I steep myself in the theme. I read books, articles, watched documentaries, really looked at my own life so that I could get real, right? I got to practice what I preach so I could make some changes or see where changes need to be made, steep in it. Then begin to look at how I'm going to take this message and convey that to the congregation. And so that is getting into reading all of the scripts and tweaking them for your congregation and figuring out what are we going to do, what are we not going to do, how do we make it our own. Making decisions. Once you have the decisions made and you've tweaked those scripts, you know exactly what you need to do to get some details done so that when the series begins, everything is ready. It's all ready. And you get to take that spiritual journey yourself. Of course, you're going to be finalizing your sermons, writing your sermons each week. But And I say that because you will already have a lot of ideas for your sermons, just as you prepare this series. Make little notes for yourself as you think of things, as you watch documentaries. Make notes. I want to use this in that sermon. I want to use this in that sermon. I want to reference that in that sermon. Keep notes. Put them in folders. So by the time you get to your sermon writing on that week, you have so much there that you just can really connect with. What is the Spirit helping me to say in this moment? And you can prepare from that place. Okay, friends. Woo! I would love to hear how it all goes. We have a Facebook page specifically for this series. We want to make sure that you go there, request to be put in there. This is, when we did Calm and Bright for Advent, we had hundreds of people in there sharing their ideas. Unbelievable. It was so awesome. So I really want us to get started with that. So go in there, start sharing your ideas, what you're doing. If you come up with ideas besides what I have done, which you will, start to share those. It's an incredible community. It's amazing. And I love to hear what you've done. Take pictures, post pictures. Love it. Jenna has put in the Facebook or in the chat that link to the Facebook group, and we'll have it in the description, the YouTube description of this webinar as well. Many blessings, friends. I wish you, pray for you, a Lent that is less busy, that you reconnect with an unhurried God. Thank you so much for what you do week in and week out for churches, and I am so blessed and grateful to be part of your journey. Bye-bye. Have a great day.